Good morning and welcome to this sunny Friday out of Port Elizabeth. Welcome to any new guys that are joining us today. Today is the last session in our series, session on self-awareness. If you recall, we decided that we were going to use self-awareness because it was the most important starting block of emotional intelligence. It's one of the, if we don't start with ourselves, where do we start? And the series will also follow on with another series more on self-management, but we'll speak about that just now. And then I just want to speak about tomorrow. So today's session we're going to be covering some of the mindfulness, some introduction to mindfulness, because a lot of the ideas that we used in this whole series on self-awareness has been mindful-based. So many of the ideas is definitely mindfulness related. So I wanted to just introduce you to mindfulness. And then we will talk a bit about that later on in today's session, and certainly what we're going to be doing after the series starting on Monday. Hi, Leonie, welcome. Then I want to just talk a bit about tomorrow morning's session. I've decided the best way to do, because we won't have time for a Q&A, and Facebook is not really a great medium unless there's a way around it, which I haven't discovered. But I'd like to do it on Zoom, so I'm going to be posting Zoom, the link. All you have to do is connect in on Zoom. Zoom is very simple. You don't have to register. You don't have to do anything. Connect on the link. You do have to download the app, which takes a minute. It's really a small app. Download the app, follow the link, just say join meeting, and then you're welcome to join. You can either put your camera on or not put your camera on. Hi, Rain. Welcome. Nadine, welcome. Happy Friday to you too. And then just connect on the link. And then at least we can actually do a proper Q&A. It's been 7 sessions. I'm sure there's lots of questions out there. So I suggest, and if you really, like as I said, if you've got any fear around or technophobia like I had, Zoom is the simplest of techniques or apps to negotiate around. So watch out on my page for that link, and then tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, between 9 and 9:30, I think you're allowed 40 minutes. So we will have a 30 to 40 minute Q&A on the session. And I'll just facilitate it, and you guys are welcome to ask me as many questions. So jot down the questions across the series that you have, and we can chat about it tomorrow. And then just before we go on, just a brief ad regarding from Monday onwards. So Monday, the course is something that I've run in a few organizations already, but I'm happy to run it on Facebook. We just will do the theory part and certainly not the practical part of it, because that's a bit more complicated. And I think at a later stage, I will probably run some sort of webinar situations with the full course, including the practical component, but that's for later on. But during lockdown, I'm happy just to share some of the theory with you. It's going to be called Conscious Self-Management, how to improve mindful management of your life, but conscious self-management. And there's at least 12 modules within that course, and I will run those across the next week or two while we're stuck here in lockdown, and perhaps on after that. So cool. So let's start today, and let's see how we go. And so just as we normally check in with the last session, this was our last slide of the previous session. The hammer shatters glass but forges steel, and it's all about flexibility. I think if you've noticed, my theme has been around flexibility. Trying to see if I can scroll down the page. Hi Barbara, I see you've joined us too. I'm just still trying to learn my way around Facebook and trying to see who's checked in, who hasn't. So the whole theme of this talk is around psychological flexibility, and if we respond to stressors like glass, we are going to shatter. It's going to break us. Life will just we won't be able to cope with life. But it's ideal to be more like steel and malleable, and be able to bend and be forged into something stronger. All right, so let's march on into our first slide. So we've been, as I said, I've briefly introduced mindfulness. This is a little bit more in-depth introduction onto mindfulness. So mindfulness is not the following. And just as a preemptive, I've been running mindfulness courses now for about 3 years. I've run probably 22 8-week practical courses, which are really good. And I've run probably about 10 or 12 of these ones, which is more just either introduction or a follow-on and a revision of mindfulness process. So mindfulness is not the following. We've all got ideas about what it is. It is not a meditation or a method of relaxing. Will you relax with being mindful? 100%, but it's not the goal. It's certainly not a religion. Many people are petrified of mindfulness. They think it's a religion. It's not a way to change your thoughts. In cognitive behavior therapy, we are taught if someone thinks they're a loser, that we must tell them, don't think that thought. You must think you're a winner. With mindfulness, it's not important, because whether you think you're a winner or a loser, these are just thought streams, and one is able to step out of it. So mindfulness is a way of changing your relationship to your thoughts and not changing your thoughts. Is it difficult? Or is it not difficult? Sorry. It is not difficult. Okay. However, it's not easy either. Mindfulness, like anything, if you're going to learn to play guitar, some people want to pick up a guitar and be able to play a song on the first day that they pick up the guitar. That's not possible. So mindfulness is going to take a lot of training. It's going to take a lot of dedication. And most of the mindfulness courses, certainly the ones that have been brought to the West, the mindfulness-based stress reduction course of Jon Kabat-Zinn, etc., is over an 8-week period. And this 8-week period is designed to break habits and allow you to constantly fight and struggle with this monkey, this chimpanzee in our brain that is so busy. So it's definitely not easy. It's not a way to be concerned with the future anymore. Many people are scared that of the anxiety, or so petrified of the anxiety that they think that mindfulness is going to get them into the present moment and make them only be in the present moment. And this is not the case, because mindfulness is not about just being in the present moment. It certainly advocates being in the present moment, but you would still need to focus on the future in order to have your goals. It's just that many of us spend our life in the future and then we don't attain our goals because we're not doing anything in the present to get to those goals. So mindfulness is a way of checking in with the present and making sure what you're doing in the present is that you are able to get to those future goals. And it's not impossible to invest scientifically. I think it's either the next slide or not. You're going to see now there's a lot of empirical evidence that's being researched and coming out of research on the efficacy of mindfulness. So mindfulness is extremely certainly is able to now be scientifically researched and proven to be effective in a number of different contexts and with a number of different maladies, from depression to anxiety to pain. Mindfulness is used across the board of areas. So mindfulness has become extremely popular. There's a number of publications out on mindfulness, and it's very simple to Google mindfulness, and you'll find hundreds of responses or things to a search engine. Mindfulness is popular. Here's 2 slides that speak to the growth of mindfulness, certainly over the last 20, 30 years. And you'll notice the spike around the year 2000 in publications and in journal articles and media articles, etc. And around the year 2000 is when sort of health psychology came into its own, positive psychology arrived, and we call this the third wave of psychology. And I'm certainly a proponent of this third wave of psychology. So transpersonal psychology, psychosynthesis, acceptance and commitment therapy, all of these mindfulness-based cognitive behavior therapy, these are all therapies that have come about since the year 2000 and have certainly utilized mindfulness as part of their process. But definitely around the year 2000, there was a huge spike in the popularity. And in the UK, and I think I read recently that in the UK, they are running a pilot project over the next 2 years, other than a speed bump with COVID in the way. But 318 schools, they're building mindfulness into their curriculum in the UK with the intention that after 2 years to put mindfulness into every single school in the UK. I think every parliamentarian has been through 8-week mindfulness program. So I know in the UK they're pretty much sold on it. America, Europe are all running mindfulness programs in corporates right now. South Africa, we're a little bit behind the black ball, but we're getting there. Like I said, I've been running it for about 2 or 3 years now, and quite a few companies have utilized that mindfulness training with their management teams. Sorry, there goes my slide again. So it is integrated. I've just mentioned this before. So it's integrated into clinical practice. It's being used across the board by many psychologists already, and these are just some of the therapies which I've already mentioned. There are 5 core components to mindfulness, and we're going to go into these in a little bit more detail. Attention, because certainly without attention, we cannot have memory. It's a starting block, and it's like with these young children that have attention deficit disorder. If we cannot attend, we cannot have memory. So attention is extremely important in mindfulness. Open awareness, we're going to touch on. That's a nice way of saying non-judgmental. Acceptance, we touched on this in the series already. We'll talk about that. They call it no identification. I call it disidentification. There's a number of ways one can call it, but disidentifying from what we're involved with. And then choice. In one of the sessions, we spoke about those word prisons that stopped us from having choice and limiting our freedom. So mindfulness is about choice, making choices. So attention. This is about focused attention and paying attention to what's occurring in this moment. So, for example, if you're drinking coffee, then you're drinking your coffee. If you're going for a mindful walk, then you're looking around. If you're having a picnic in Scotland in a beautiful forest, you can look around and listen to the birds. You can smell the flowers or smell the grass. Notice, use your senses. Bring your senses into it, because your senses are one thing that puts you into the present moment immediately. And it's becoming aware of your thoughts, your physical sensations, your emotions, and your feelings. So, there's many religious doctrines that will talk about becoming still. And if we are not still, and we are busy, we will never be able to become or check in with ourselves. So mindfulness teaches you to check in regularly on where's my head at, what am I thinking about, how am I feeling, and what's going on in my body. Is it feeling stiff? Why am I feeling stiff there? How am I feeling? Is it because of a situation that I'm caught up in? So this is what attention's about, and we become a lot more aware. And like I said, initially it is quite difficult to do, because we're so used to getting away from our bodies in our minds by being in the future or the past. But this is a way of checking in with your body. Then open awareness. This is about becoming aware of judgment. We can never stop judgment. We judge all the time. It's windy outside. It's too hot. It's too cold. I don't like feeling this way. I feel locked up. I want to do this. Why can't I do that? So this awareness of judgment is an extremely important thing. So what mindfulness teaches you to do is to be aware of that judgment, and then just shift that judgment aside so that you can at least see what's going on in front of you with an open mind, rather than through this judgmental lens that we use. And then becoming aware of this labeling. If you don't want to call it judgment, we sometimes call it labeling, and labeling everything good versus bad. And sometimes it's not good versus bad. It is what it is. And I think if you saw quite a few of my posts this morning where I had today's talk in mind. So I posted a lot of posts around this thing about good or bad, or if there's potholes in the road. It's just potholes, just go around them. Someone said to me, but the tire shops are closed. So what happens if I hit a pothole and I damage my tire? I said, well, then you can walk, or get on your bicycle. So let go of all these labels and judgments, and just experience life fully with open awareness. Then acceptance. As I said, this is the toughest one for us to grasp. This is accepting the current experience as it is, and not what we think it is, because our brains will turn that experience into something horrendous, depending on whether we like the feeling it's generating or not. So we need to accept the current experience as it is, and try and work around it. And if we can't change it, then we have to accept it and work with it. So of course, it's not attempting to change it, and this is not necessarily sometimes always the situation. It's the feeling that it's making us have. And like I said, that feeling can be one of disrespect, or being bullied, or insecure, whatever it might be. And then not having a struggle. We spoke a little bit about that struggle metaphor, about switching off the struggle switch. If we switch off the struggle switch, then we don't need to fight with that feeling. It's when we've got the struggle switch on that we don't want to feel that feeling. I think we talked about this dirty discomfort versus clean discomfort. And dirty discomfort is something that we don't want to feel, whereas if we can change that discomfort into something clean, then it can be there, and we don't need to fight with it. And then this disidentification, I prefer the word disidentification. We spoke about, and I'm hoping you remember that phrase, thoughts are just thoughts and feelings are just feelings. We are not that emotion, and we are not that thought. We can have thoughts, but because they change, we cannot be those thoughts. We can have feelings, but because they change, we cannot be those feelings. So just to remind ourselves that we are not the emotion and thought. I'm the person that's having the thought. I'm the person that's having the feeling. Okay. Remember we spoke a little bit about, instead of going I am sad, to say I am feeling sad, or I notice that I'm feeling sad. Instead of saying I am a loser, I'm having a thought that I'm a loser. I notice I'm having a thought that I'm a loser. So we can experience sadness versus be I am sad, because the minute you say I am sad, we literally become sadness instead of experiencing that sadness. And a reminder that, as we said with thought fusion, not everything we think is true. Just because we think it doesn't make it true. All right? It might be true, but it's not necessarily the truth. And that to understand that these states, these emotions and thoughts come and go. When we did that exercise yesterday or the day before, I showed you how, over the course of our lifetime, thoughts constantly change, feelings change, our roles change, our bodies change, nothing stays the same. So they come and go. And then lastly, choice. This is about not letting these states take over. We have a choice to allow ourselves to be overcome or overwhelmed by these emotions, or we can just make a decision that I'm going to be sad and then I'm going to move on. A big part of working with feelings is naming the feeling, accepting the feeling, deciding what you want to do with it, and then moving on. But we don't need to allow that state to take us over completely. Then another big thing about choice is, and this is why mindfulness creates this great psychological distance, where it's almost like hitting the pause button. And before mindfulness, or before getting mindful, or before waking up, or before becoming conscious. So this whole idea about conscious self-management is that there's a pause button between stimulus and response. So just before you say something, I think many people have said to me in the past that they are unable to stop what comes out of their mouth because they have a thought and there's no filter between their thought and what comes out of their mouth. So mindfulness, I want to share my own experience. I think I have way better, not control over my anger, but I'm able to express my anger in a much better way. And if I'm angry and if I'm saying something to you, I very seldom have to apologize about what I'm saying because everything I've said has been a conscious word that's come out of my mouth. It's not unconscious. We normally have to apologize when something comes out of our mouth and we shut our mouths off. So if you're consciously angry, you will be very clear and particular about the words that you're using, and you can still be angry. So mindfulness is not about being this Zen Buddhist monk that never gets angry. You're going to get angry, but you're going to be able to express it in a much better way. And to find that, as I said, there's a pause button between stimulus and response, and you're able to make a conscious decision or conscious action. Well, there's again this conscious versus automatic behavior. I had a participant in one of my groups once that said to me, they were in, let's just call some sort of police system, and they said to me, could I still hit the person? And I said, well, you're probably not going to hit them if you're mindful, but if you are mindful and you want to consciously hit the person, then you can still consciously hit them. So, whereas in the past, that person might have just lashed out and given someone a slap, now they might think twice about doing so, or if they still want to give them a slap, they would consciously give them a slap and then have no excuse afterwards because it wouldn't have been a reflex action. So we start acting a lot more consciously rather than automatic. And just before we go into this thing about sounding easy, what mindfulness does, it stops impulsivity and reactivity. So mindlessness, as I said, which is on the other side of mindfulness, is about rushing through activities without being attentive to them. So many of us, and this is why I said, even myself included, and this is why this lockdown's been quite good for me, because I've been wanting to get onto virtual systems and start doing this kind of a work for a while, but I wasn't able to stop because we were rushing through activities. I was always busy. I was always fully booked, moving from one client to another. And this has allowed us to stop, regroup, reset ourselves. So mindfulness helps us to do the opposite of mindlessness. And many of us just rush without stopping. And certainly over my career, I've moved from diagnosing myself with hurry sickness, constantly rushing from point A to point B and not stopping to smell the roses. I could never understand that concept until I discovered mindfulness. Also, when we're mindless, we're often clumsy. We break or spill things because of carelessness. We're thinking about something else. We're not watching what we're doing. Some other examples of mindlessness is, I've lost my cursor there, is failing to notice subtle feelings of physical tension or discomfort. Sometimes we aren't even aware that we are holding tension in our body. And I remember seeing one guy that he always used to come in here and sit really like bolt upright, and he was just always like it, and he didn't realize that there was a huge difference between the way he was holding tension in his body and relaxing. So it's important that mindfulness will teach you the difference between those two. And then finding yourselves preoccupied with the future or past. This is also being when we're not mindful, because that's not happening now. We don't know what's going to happen at the end of this. So many people I saw on Facebook were asking, how long is this going to be? When is it going to end? I need someone to tell me this, because it's all about control, and we don't know. And we only know what's going to happen today, so we have to work through today. So don't get preoccupied with the past. And then, of course, snacking. Once we become mindful, that mindless snacking, when we're bored, is going to be something of the past. So mindfulness is a wonderful way, if you want to start eating healthy, to start eating healthy. So practicing mindfulness, we have all these 5 areas: attention, open awareness, acceptance, disidentification, and choice. And these are all prevented by automatic patterns or habit. Because when we habitually going through things, or when we habitually think about certain things, remember, our brains get wired into a certain way. And it's almost like the car has to drive that way. So we constantly keep thinking in the same way over and over and over again. And it's prevented by automatic patterns. So to become mindful, we have to literally reverse a bit, stop, reassess, and then start on a new path. But that path doesn't close. But because of neuroplasticity, we are able to develop new neural pathways and start thinking in a new direction. But the habit is going to take at least 3 weeks to break of thinking in a certain way. I know in Buddhism they talk about a state called beginner's mind, and beginner's mind is starting something afresh. And if you constantly deal with someone in the same way, we end up judging that person, putting them in a box, and then that person can't move out of that box. And whereas with beginner's mind, if we keep our centers, we are able to respond to that person in a fresh way, as difficult as it might be, and not be overcome by their displays towards us. So we have to become, as I said, more conscious, and I think automatic would be the opposite of being conscious. So extensive practice is needed, and in mindfulness, proper mindfulness training, you're taught, it certainly revolves around an exercise called the body scan. I keep losing my PowerPoint. The body scan, and then we do different types of breathing meditation. There's sitting meditation, there's a walking meditation, and small informal daily practices, which is like while you're brushing your teeth, just focus on brushing your teeth. Be aware of the toothbrush in your mouth. Be aware of the taste of the toothpaste, the smell of the toothpaste, maybe the taste of the water when you rinse your mouth out. These are all informal daily practices that can be built into your practice. And then applying the knowledge of mindfulness. So these are some little definitions of it. Jon Kabat-Zinn, like I said, is the guy who brought it to the West. Paying attention, we've touched on this definition in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Russell Harris, who's an Australian, very involved with acceptance and commitment therapy, he talks about consciously bringing awareness to the here and now experience with openness, interest. So that interest is also beginner's mind. It's like the first time you go look at a rock pool on the beach. That's beginner's mind. It's like, wow, if you've got a young child, they constantly might show you 10 leaves or 10 worms or 10 aeroplanes that have flown over. Because every aeroplane that flies over is a new experience for them. And we're like, I've seen that. That's the 10th aeroplane I've looked at. So it teaches us to be more receptive and in that present moment. And children are very present. Then Ruth Baer, and the non-judgmental observation of the ongoing stream of internal and external stimuli as they arise. And then this guy whose name I always struggle to pronounce, Thich Nhat Hanh, keeping one's consciousness alive to the present reality. Keeping one's consciousness alive to the present reality. Like I mentioned, if you're having a picnic, to be aware that if you're watching a sunrise or a sunset, to be there with that sunrise or sunset. So just in summary, what is mindfulness? It's living in the present moment. It's engaging fully in what you're doing rather than getting lost in your thoughts. Noticing these feelings as they come and go without attempting to control them, but just check in with them. Like I said to you, it wasn't part of this course, but the way to work with feelings is when you check in with yourself, to just try and name the feeling. Go, what am I feeling right now? Am I scared? People often go, straight away they say, I'm angry. What's underneath the anger? Because anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is not the actual emotion. When I first started doing psychology or therapy, people often came here for anger management. But anger management is the symptom. Anger is a secondary emotion. It's not the primary emotion. Something else is causing that anger, and that's normally insecurity. Can even be low self-esteem. It can be sadness. It could be frustration. It could be a whole lot of other things. So try and find the core emotion that's causing the anger, and then allow yourself to accept it first, and then decide what do you want to do with that feeling, and then to move on from that feeling. And then, as I said, changing our relationship to the thoughts and feelings, to stop being scared of it, so that we allow that feeling to be. So without our mindfulness, we end up being ruled by the past and future. We end up being governed by our thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. We end up thinking at that level of thoughts and feelings, and not at the level of myself, Greg. And remember, I'll just remind you that we can have thoughts, but I'm not my thoughts. We've had that slide before. So we have to decide whether we're surviving or we're thriving. And like I said to you, those surviving is all about the negative emotions, and it's going to take a lot of energy away. It's going to make you feel like you're stressed or you're suffering. Whereas thriving is this joy, happiness, calm, tranquility, peace, love. And these emotions are going to help you to start feeling vital and give you a lot more energy, and you'll start feeling like you're thriving. So you have to move in this direction of thriving rather than surviving. And surviving is only two options, three options: fight, flee, or freeze. So this slide, I think, is just a second or third last slide now. It's so important to you to know yourself. I think even in the Oracle of Delphi, in Greek mythology, above her cave, if you went to go see her, it said, know thyself. And the argument was that if you didn't know yourself and you went in to see this oracle, you would come out mad at the end, because she would destroy you if you didn't know who you were. So know yourself. It's very important. Then you're going to begin to understand why things are as they are and why life is as it is. And like I said, it's very important to start with yourself, because you can't control other people. So is there hope? Yes. We need to accept what we can't change. We need to stop the blame game. Look at ourselves. I think check in with yourselves and decide how can I change myself. control only what I can control. And remember, what we can control is only our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. We cannot control others. It's through our own behavior that we'll be able to change other people. And we need to start with ourselves. We need to be mindful. And like I said, this phrase I learned in my 20s, every day give your brain a shampoo, is phenomenally effective and it's phenomenally powerful. Like I said, use a visualization if you have to. When you're washing your hair, scrub your brain with your hands. Imagine these tendrils coming out of your fingers that are rinsing your brain. And like I said, even if you want to take your brain out of your head and hold it under the shower, or rinse it in the bath and scrub it out and stick it back in your head, a visualization is really popular and a tool to use when we're doing these things. And you can Google that if you want to check on the efficacy of visualizations. And our environment will follow. If we change ourselves, the environment will definitely follow. As we change, whatever is within, the outside world changes too. And like I often say to people, when we do that, when we did that cybernetics thing of that systems theory of working in a family, and if we could change someone else, the minute you change yourself, the other person has to change because it follows. And it's a very powerful technique of changing myself, the outside world will follow. And this is again the internal locus of control versus external. I want to just end with this poem by this Vietnamese Jana. It goes like this: the wind whistles in the bamboo and the bamboo dances. When the wind stops, the bamboo grows still. A silver bird flies over the autumn lake. When it's past, the lake surface doesn't try and hold on to the image of the bird. So it's a very powerful poem, and it speaks to how even a ripple, if you threw a stone into a lake, it would have a ripple, and the ripple would go outwards, but eventually the lake goes calm. It doesn't try and hold on to those ripples. And then lastly, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Don't try and control what you can't control, and try and change yourself so that you can work the best with what you do have. So I want to thank you for joining me on this ride. I want to remind you that I'm going to post the Zoom link for tomorrow. Please join me, those of you that have been regulars. I'm sure there's lots of questions. And if there are, if you've got friends that have been watching, pull them along. I think Zoom, you can take quite a few people on there. I think 30, 40 people. And it's quite nice. Everyone can be there and we can all be asking questions at the same time. So tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, join me and I'll put the link up there for Zoom and just come with some questions so that, because I don't want to be doing a lot of the talking. I want you guys to bring the questions and I'll answer those. All right. Thank you very much for joining me. We'll see you tomorrow.